Is this a great game or what? With Tim and Jeff Kurkjian. Thank you for coming back for another episode. And today we have a very special guest. Buck Showalter is going to be joining us. And he is just the quintessential baseball lover. He's like us on the show. We just love the little things about this game.
He loves it way more than we do, and we love it. Buck asked me once, Tim, you ever seen a great player who has a lot of freckles? That was the question he asked me. I said, what? I've never been asked that. So I said, Rusty Staub. The only one I could think of. He said, a great player. I said, not a really good player. Those are the questions that Buck's asked, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Things like that.
No, I didn't have a chance to ask him this, but Buck is not that's not his real name, right? Like his legal
Nathaniel
name?
is his real name, and his son is named Nathaniel, but he has, of course, Bucky's been going by Buck since college, I think it is. Like Walter Johnson has the greatest nickname, of course, because I went to Walter. Did I ever tell you I went to Walter Johnson?
You've worn a sweatshirt almost every episode.
Well, he was the big train. Now, people didn't say, okay, here comes the big train, but that was his nickname. It's one of the great nicknames ever. Back then, the nicknames, Ted Williams was a splendid splinter. I mean, Lou Gehrig was the Iron Horse. Joe DiMaggio was the Yankee Clipper. I mean, you can't do any better than that. A little bit further on, Randy Johnson was the big unit because he was 6'10", and he was so great. Greatness at one point in the major leagues was measured by the unit. That's how good he was. And, of course, Reggie Jackson had one of the great ones ever, Mr. October. So a few years ago, he's working for the Yankees as an advisor. And he's going to Cleveland during the playoffs, and he doesn't have his pass to get into the clubhouse. And some really young kid there will not let him in. And he says, I don't know your name. Can you spell your name for me? And Reggie looks at the guy and goes, spell my name? Mroctober. That's my name, Mr. October. So I love that.
That is amazing.
I also love the ones when I was growing up because those are the ones that really stick with you. Of course, I grew up outside of D.C., so Frank Howard was our star player, and his nickname was Hondo, and he still hit, I believe, the longest home runs in the history of baseball. Hondo was one of our heroes growing up. The White Sox had a guy named Walt Williams, and his nickname was No Neck, Walt No Neck Williams. So you got to look up his baseball card. Yeah. He doesn't have a neck. His head is like attached to the rest of his body.
Shoulders.
But that is so great. My minor league one, I remember doing this for Sports Illustrated. There was a guy named Pork Chop Pugh. That was his name. Last name Pough. So I said, Pork Chop, where did that come from? So he said, in Little League, we had two guys on the team, and both of our nicknames were Pokey. So we couldn't have two Pokies. So since I was so much bigger than everyone, they called me Pork Chop instead. And he said, my high school teachers all called me Pork Chop, even though his first name was Clyde, which I love. And then this is one of my new favorites of the last 20 years. The Rockies had a reliever named David Lee. And one time on a trip in spring training, the bus driver got sick. So David Lee had to drive the bus. And they were short on fuel, so they had to stop and pull over. And he gets out of the chair, and he looks at everyone on the team and goes, we got to get some diesel. So he became Diesel Lee. David Diesel Lee. Now, that's one of those organic nicknames that just comes out of nowhere, as opposed to, say, Lenny Dykstra, who walked in the clubhouse one day and said, I want you guys to start calling me Nails. That's my name now. He came up with his own nickname. Who does that?
Yeah, you can't do your own nickname.
No, if you do your own nickname, it doesn't count. Now, the best one ever, and this is the most obscure one also, is a guy named Doug Goosh, who caught for a year in the big leagues, Padres, early 80s, I think. Doug Goosh spells his last name Gwosdz. Gwosdz. His nickname was iChart. Because as Doug Rader told me, when you look at his name, you have to put your hand over your eye and go, Gwodsz. Those are the best nicknames, the ones that people come up with when they come out of nowhere.
let's get the takeaways from the league, Major League Baseball right now. What do you got?
Well, there's so much great pitching out there, Jeff. Like Dylan Cease of the Padres is having another great year. 2.919 ERA, 60 strikeouts in 49 and a third innings. And they're great pitchers in the National League, but he's one of them. By the way, you know how much I love anagrams. So Dylan Cease anagram is C, S-E-E, A, Cy, Land. So he's never won a Cy Young before. This might be the first year that he wins the Cy Young. So the anagram for Dylan Cease is C-A, Cy, Land. How about that?
That's pretty great.
All right. American League, there are so many good ones. Seth Lugo, though, might be the best pitcher in the American League this year for the Royals. He's got a 1.66 ERA. He can spin that breaking ball with anyone, and he's always been a good pitcher. Now he's a great pitcher, and this is what is so beautiful about baseball, Jeff, is not out of nowhere, but suddenly the Royals signed this guy to upgrade, get a veteran pitcher, and he's basically been the best pitcher in the American League so far. The other guy is Gunnar Henderson. I did the Diamondbacks-Orioles game on Saturday, and Gunnar Henderson, who is 22 years old, he hit 10 homers before we got to May. No player that young had ever hit 10 homers before we got to May. That's how good he is. This is the point. I'm standing there with Luis Gonzalez, who's a broadcaster now for the Diamondbacks, one of the 3 greatest Diamondbacks ever, once hit 57 homers in a season. He is a big, strong man. He was introduced by Jim Palmer to Gunnar Henderson, and Gunnar Henderson shakes his hand. When Gunnar Henderson leaves, Luis Gonzalez looks at me and goes, I can't believe how big he is. He's a shortstop. And he said, those are some of the biggest hands I've ever seen, and they're on a shortstop. Jeff, other than the money in the game changing so much in the 45 years that I've covered, the biggest change is how big the players are. Gunnar Henderson is enormous, and he's a shortstop. That's where we are in the game today, and that's how he hits 10 home runs before we even get to May. The other thing that's really going on in baseball that has me worried, Jeff, is what we have. We have catcher's interference at a historically high rate, and here's why. In order to frame a pitch properly, which is seemingly all that our catchers are told to do now. Make sure you frame that pitch so you can potentially steal a strike. So they're all moving right up on home plate. They're getting closer to the plate. And Wilson Contreras of the Cardinals had his arm broken the other day because of a backswing from J.D. Martinez, who has this really long swing. He broke the catcher's arm because the catcher has gotten so close to the batter in order to steal a strike. And not only are we have all these violations, we have over 30 catcher's interferences already this year. It's unbelievably high rate. People are actually getting hurt. So Brandon Hyde, the manager of the Orioles, told me the other day that he tells his catchers when he sees them getting too close, Adley Rutschman, back off a little bit. I don't care if you can't steal 2 or 3 strikes a game. I don't want a catcher's interference, and I don't want you getting hurt. It's a real problem in the game as we try to reinvent all these things. Maybe sometimes we're doing them in the wrong way. By the way, catcher's interference is scored as error catcher, no time at bat for the hitter. By the way, Pete Rose had the most catcher's interferences in the history of baseball until Jacoby Ellsbury in the last 15 years passed him. They're like 31 and 30. We actually keep track of catcher's interference, which is amazing. The other thing about catcher's interference that people don't understand is, let's say you hit the catcher's mitt with your bat. That's an instant violation. But if the guy, say, gets a hit and everyone on base advances, you can decline the penalty like we're in a football game. You know, offsides, declined, it's a touchdown.
Right.
And the other day, you remember what happened in the Padres game? The Padres had runners at first and third, and Jake Cronenworth, the hitter, hit a ground ball in which there was an out made at second base. But the man on third scored. But since all the runners did not advance because the guy got put out at second, Mike Schilt, the Padres manager, chose to take the violation. He took a run off the board. He sent the runner back to third so he could have the bases loaded for his next hitter, Manny Machado.
And it ultimately paid off for them. But percentage-wise, did you know that their percentage of scoring or winning that game actually went down when he made that decision.
Right.
Despite now he took an out off the board because it was a fielder's choice, right? And a run scored. And they ended up winning the game by 2 runs, and they scored 2 runs that inning.
Right. I'm not sure the last time I saw a run taken off the board in a baseball game, and the offensive manager chose to take it away because he wanted Manny to bat with the bases loaded. That's more than you need to know about catcher's interference, but it's one of those scoring rules that I just love so much.
Who is our game changer of the week this week?
Well, I'm not sure there's any way around it, but it's Paul Skenes of the Pirates, okay? His debut on Saturday was the most anticipated pitching debut, other than maybe Shohei Ohtani coming from Japan, since Steven Strasburg 14 years ago. Steven Strasburg in that game, I was there, Jeff. No walks, 14 strikeouts. For only pitcher in history to have no walks, 14 strikeouts in his major league debut. And it was so electric. And the similar electricity was in Pittsburgh. Skenes went 4 innings, struck out 7 guys. He threw 17 pitches at least 100 miles an hour. His average velocity for his fastball was 101.2, which was the highest in the StatCast era for any starting pitcher that covers 16 years. That's how great Paul Skenes. He wasn't great that day. He was really good. But that stuff is so good. I can't wait to watch him pitch again.
I think this is really, really cool. So you know what he's decided to do? Every strikeout he throws this season, he's going to donate $100 of his own money to the Gary Sinise Foundation.
Is that right?
Yeah, and Gary Sinise, amazing actor, Apollo 13 and so many great films.
Right.
And but he's always been dedicating his time when he's not on the screen to helping veterans. Right. And so the organization is great. And I think a guy as young as he says, well, I'm hopefully going to have a major league career here. I'm going to do something to give back. Awesome. Just wanted to give him a shout out.
By the way, that is Paul Skenes. When he was at the Air Force Academy, they're lined up before a game because they do everything right at the Air Force Academy. And a couple of the young guys on the team, and Skenes is a sophomore at the time, a couple of them are kind of talking in line when they're supposed to be quiet and respectful. And he put his arm around both of those guys and said, very politely and diplomatically, this is not how we operate at the Air Force Academy. That's who Paul Skenes is. He isn't just a guy who throws 100. He has such a great understanding of who he is, where he is, and what this is all about.
Do you think I can kick off the Kurkjians this week?
I love it when you know why I love it when you kick off the Kurkjians? Because that means someone has sent something to you or you found something on your own. I implore people, I love these things. If you have something, tell it to me. I will use it because there's only so many things I can look up.
Well, I'll tell you this much. My goal this season is to get you with a Kurkjian either from someone who listens to the show or one myself that you don't know.
All right.
I've brought up a lot, and most of them you've gotten. There are only 2 players in Major League Baseball history to have the last name Moyer. Okay?
Right.
Jamie Moyer and Ed Moyer. Only 2 players ever to play Major League Baseball. Here's the Kurkjian of it. On November 18th, 1962, Ed Moyer passed away. On November 18th, 1962, Jamie Moyer was born.
Okay, Jeff, this
I looked it up.
This is so perfect for what we're doing on the show today. It's little things like that absolutely fascinate me. And I must tell you, Walter Johnson died on December 10th, 1946. I was born on December 10th, 1956. The number of times I've slapped my head over this game, Jeff, and that is beautiful. Ed and Jamie Moyer, I'll never forget it for the rest of my life.
We had 2 people send that in, but the first person I have to give credit for, because another Kurkjian, his name, Chuck Elias.
No!
I swear. And I ended up I confirmed everything with it. Yeah, Chuck Elias. Thank you so much for getting that in first at greatgameorwhat.com. If you have a Kurkjian or anything you want to add, you can always message us right there on the website. Okay, your turn. I got him, though.
That was great. Woo. No one could get that, and that's why I love it, that someone could find something like that. All right, in the Paul Skenes game, the Pirates walked 6 batters with the bases loaded in 1 inning. which the last time that happened was 1959. I can't believe it even happened in 1959. So I started looking up, with help from the Elias, who has the most innings pitched without ever walking anyone with the bases loaded. So Rick Reed, who used to pitch for this is not the most ever, but the most recent. He had 1,540 innings without ever walking anyone with the bases loaded. And Tyler Anderson has the most. He's pitched almost 1,000 innings in the major leagues and has never walked anyone with the bases loaded. So Jim Palmer, Hall of Famer Jim Palmer, I just saw the other day, he never gave up a grand slam in his career in almost 4,000 innings. Wow. So he told me once, he said, when I knew I might be in trouble of giving up a grand slam, occasionally I just walk a guy with the bases loaded. Not intentionally, but I know I can get the next guy out, having a little trouble with him. So I, having nothing else to do with my life, looked up the 11 guys that he walked with the bases loaded in his career. So the next day, I go to the ballpark and I say, Cakes, I have a list of players, and I'm going to read them off to you. They have something to do with your career. So I got like 3 names in, like, Carlos May and Jack Brohammer, and all of a sudden he looks at me and he goes, oh, those are the guys that walked with the bases loaded. He knew that after 3 names. This is why baseball is so great. And speaking of the Elias, I saw something the other day. Manny Margot had this batting line, Jeff: 4 at-bats, 1 run, 1 hit, 5 RBIs. 4, 1, 1, 5. And he didn't hit a home run. So I called Frank at the Elias and said, I don't think I've ever seen a 4-1-1-5 without anybody hitting a home run. A 3-run double and had 2 ground outs that scored runs. Well, No player since 1900 has ever had that batting line. 4-1-1-5. And these are the things that I see drinking a Diet Mountain Dew in the morning, thinking, God, this is so cool. I wonder if there's something to this. And when you find out there is something to it, it is really, really cool.
I have a funny RBI story. It's not going to land well in Major League Baseball, but our kickball team got mercy ruled the other day. And mostly because somebody hit a sac fly to center field, and they scored from second base.
There's a sacrifice fly in a kickball game?
Yeah, you can hit a sacrifice fly in kickball.
You can kick a sacrifice fly.
Yeah.
So he scored from second.
It's from second, mostly because our defense is just atrocious. But we caught it in center field, deep center field, and couldn't get it in time. So somebody scored from second base, and we got mercy ruled.
All right. I may offend people here. Jeff, you're a good little athlete, and you're playing kickball, and you're only 30 years old. Can we not play something? Can we get back in the gym and shoot some hoops or what?
It's a co-ed, so my wife plays with us. So, it's all for the family, except for when you lose 15-0. Anyway,
so Fernando Tatis hit another homer. That's 114 for him. And he passed his father on the all-time home run list, Fernando Tatis Sr., who hit 2 grand slams in 1 inning off the same guy, Chano Park. So Fernando Tatis passed his father on Sunday on the all-time home run list, 114 to 113, which of course brings me to one of my favorite notes. Prince and Cecil Fielder, father and son, finished their careers with exactly the same amount of homers.
Wow.
319. Only stuff like that can happen in baseball. Those are the Kurkjians for the day.
Well, we have a very special birthday that we need to celebrate, right, Dad? And it's actually the birthday of a father of one of our first guests.
Today is May the 14th, and it's Tony Perez's 82nd birthday. Tony Perez is a Hall of Fame player, one of my favorite players to watch growing up, an absolutely integral part of the Big Red Machine in Cincinnati, one of the great clutch hitters, one of the great teammates ever. And since we've talked about nicknames as we've gone along, his nickname was Doggy. So,
excuse me?
Doggy was, and I knew that was his nickname all these years, but until Sunday, I didn't know why they called him Doggy. I'm embarrassed I didn't know this. So I called Eduardo, our dear friend, and said, Eddie, why is your dad nicknamed Doggy? And he said, Lee May, former teammate, gave him the nickname Doggy. And he said, number one is that he is man's best friend because everyone loves Tony Perez, and Tony Perez is kind to everyone. And the second reason he told me is that when Tony Perez would order a steak with a bone in, when you looked at the plate when he was done, there was nothing left on the bone. So that's why they called him Doggy, because he would eat a steak probably like a dog would eat a steak and take everything off the bone.
League in Lids, we put all of the Major League Baseball teams into one of our cool Lids hats
The
here.
new Lids hat.
The new Lids hat. If you don't follow us on YouTube or subscribe is what the YouTubers call it, you can actually watch the show. So in a minute, we're going to do It's in the Cards, where you can actually see us open a pack of Topps cards. So we'll get to that in a second, and you can also see our cool new Lids hat. So let's see what team we're going to be talking about this week.
Okay.
We've got the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Okay, Diamondbacks, of course, went to the World Series last year. They're off to a difficult start this year, but they played basically the whole year without their shortstop, without their center fielder, and with 3/5 of their starting rotation on the injured list, plus Corbin Carroll, who's a great player, is off to a very slow start. But I saw the Diamondbacks the other day in Baltimore, and I had another long chat with Torey Lovello, their manager, who's one of my favorite guys ever, because he's just so interested in everything. He's so curious. He's interested in what's going on in your life. So he loves basketball, much like I love basketball. And what I didn't know, I know that every time the Diamondbacks go on a road trip, the coaches, the managers, trainers, stuff like that, they go play basketball somewhere on the road. And Torey does it every week, and he loves it. He was a good high school player, and all he wanted to do was, after he wanted to play basketball at UCLA, and he wanted to be, as he told me, the Rudy of the basketball team at UCLA, like the real tough guy that comes off the bench and just can't wait to be there. But he was a very good high school player and is still a good player. And Torey also told me, he said, when I retire from baseball managing, like when I'm like 70 years old, he said, I want to go coach a high school basketball team. That's how much he loves basketball,
Wow.
but that's how much he's interested in everything. And by the way, his dad used to be the producer of the TV show Hee Haw, which is way before your time, Jeff. But Hee Haw was a show that I used to watch, and it was Roy Clark and Buck Owens were the two stars, two great singers. And Torey and Roy Clark became like really close friends because he was on the set all the time. And young Torey was like 7 years old, and he appeared on the show once, and they asked him a question on the show. No, he asked them a question on the show. He said, why does it take longer to get from second to third than it does to get from first to second? And Roy Clark looked at him and he said, because there's a short stop in between. That's what Torey Lovello told on Hee Haw once, and at age 7. That's why I love being around him. He makes us laugh all the time. He told us 10 stories the other day that made us laugh out loud. But that, Jeff, is one reason why he's such a good manager, is he can relate to people. He can sit and have a conversation with anybody about anything. And that's why he's able to sit his players down and understand what they're going through. That's what makes a really good manager.
Worth noting, we have a really good manager joining us at the end of the show today. Buck Showalter is going to be our guest. Are we ready for It's in the Cards?
Yes, love, It's in the Cards. These are just, what do we call? We rip them open?
We rip them.
It's a pack of cards, right?
Yeah, not a deck.
It's not a Nick pack of cards. Go.
Spencer Torkelson is our first one.
All right, now he's the Tigers' first baseman. He hit 31 homers last season, and Sunday he hit his first homer of the season, and it came in his 38th game.
Wow.
So only 2 other players have ever hit 30 homers in a season and then gone that many games into the next season without hitting a home run. Earl Averill of the Indians did it in the 30s, and a couple years ago, Marcus Semien did it. He hit 43 homers one year, and the next year took him 43 homers to hit his first. So Spencer Torkelson finally hit his first homer. Good for him.
How about Randy Arozarena?
All right, now, Arozarena has really struggled, Jeff. He's sitting in the 100s. He's a really good hitter. And, he came up and made an amazing splash in the 2020 World Series against the Dodgers. The whole postseason, he just dominated. And, he's from Cuba, and he lives his life every day as his birthday, as he has said, because he was rescued from Cuba. Now he's played in the major leagues. So after 2020, he went home in the offseason, and among the many things he did was he raced a horse. And he beat a horse in a race. So he comes back to spring training the next year and tells Kevin Cash, his manager, I want the green light on the bases this year, so I'm allowed to steal whenever I want. And Kevin Cash says, well, why do you deserve the green light? And he goes, well, I just beat a horse in a race. All right, good enough for me. Kevin said,
there it is.
You go when I tell you to go. I don't care if you can beat a horse.
Kevin Gausman.
Kevin Gausman has one of the great split-finger fastballs that I have ever seen. And the interesting part about it to me is he told me he never practices his split-fingered fastball in between starts. So when he goes and throws a bullpen, he never throws his best pitch because it can irritate and bring about a blister, because to hold a baseball within the, your index and your middle finger is virtually impossible. He throws it so well, so not to even think about getting a blister, he doesn't even practice his best pitch in between starts. I mean, that would like Steph Curry. Not the same level. It'd be like Steph Curry saying, I'm not going to shoot any threes. I'll just be ready for the game. That's what Kevin Gausman does.
It's so funny because when he used to play for the Orioles, I remember me and some buddies, we went to an Orioles game when they did like a jersey, like the T-shirt jersey giveaway.
Right.
And I got it like 100 years ago, right? And as you do when you're in a relationship, every once in a while some of your shirts and sweatshirts become your significant others. I don't know how this happened, but my wife, as one of her sleep shirts, right? She sleeps in a T-shirt. She has a Kevin Gausman jersey. And it's Orioles, and I asked her once, I said, do you even know who's on the back? And she said, there's a name on the back. Joey Meneses.
Joey Meneses hit his first homer, Nationals first baseman DH of the season the other day. He's hit some homers in his career. So my favorite Joey Meneses story is, it took him into his 30s to get finally called up to the major league. So his manager, Matt LeCroy, in AAA, waited, found out that Joey was going to the big league. So he goes to his door in the hotel at 3:00 in the morning and knocks on the door at 3:00 in the morning to alert his first baseman, you're going to the big leagues for the first time. Joey doesn't even answer the phone because who is knocking on his door at 3:00 in the morning? So Matt LeCroy, he knocks again, and Joey just assumes it's the maid, and he yells, I don't need any towels. And instead it was Matt LeCroy saying, I'm your manager, let me in, you're going to the big leagues. That's how he found out he was going.
And last but not least, for It's in the Cards, we have Patrick Wisdom.
Oh, yeah. Patrick Wisdom, third baseman, part-time third baseman now for the Cubs. Went to Stanford, really smart guy, strikes out a lot, but has tremendous power, and one of the best guys you'll ever meet. So, again, Jeff, I'm trying to come up with some ridiculous team of players every week on Is This a Great Game or What? So Patrick Wisdom is on the all-smart team. You were wondering, you thought it might be the all-teeth team? Wisdom, teeth? No? All right. So there are a couple stretches here, Jeff, but Harry Bright is the first baseman. The second baseman, even though we should use Brett wisely because he just came up with the Giants, but there was a guy who played in the major leagues, a second baseman named Dave Brain. So I think we got Dave Brain. We got to keep that. Bobby Witt Jr. is the shortstop. Mm-hmm. Patrick Wisdom is the third baseman. Dwayne Wise is one of the outfielders. Bill Sharp is one of the outfielders. I must tell you, Jeff, I really had a hard time coming up with third outfielder, so I panicked and I picked Socrates Brito.
One of the greatest
philosopher minds of all time. Socrates Brito is our right fielder, and this is the real stretch. I couldn't find a catcher, so what I did was I picked Mike Ivy, who started his career as a catcher, and the pitcher who would be pitching to him would be Brandon League, so it would be the Ivy League battery. I couldn't help it, Jeff. I had to. And the last one is John Smart. He will wrap up the all-smart team, and the manager is Johnny Keane, who managed Cardinals, Yankees in his major league career. That is the all-smart team.
That's a little best of all Tim there.
Right.
And, last week you did the all-fruit and vegetable team.
Right.
All fruit and veggie. And I have to shout out a couple of great game listeners. Ed Lockett said that you could add, stay with me,
Right.
Chuck Knobloch, because in German, Knobloch means garlic. Now,
we had Kyle Garlick on the team.
Kyle Garlic on the team.
We can't use the same one twice, even with another derivation.
Pardon me on this possible pronunciation. Ken Hasted said, well, we need a manager for the fruit and vegetable team. He said Bob Lemon.
Yeah, what I had Chet Lemon was the center fielder. Jeff, when you do this team, you can only have one.
Well, okay.
Right, Bob Lemon was a great pitcher, too.
Yeah.
But I needed an outfielder. I was short, so I used Chet Lemon. I know about Bob Lemon.
He gave you another manager option.
Yes,
though.
please.
He said it might be a stretch, but Eric Wedge.
Oh!
Like
I
a
worked
salad?
with him in ESPN. Wedgie, yes. Eric Wedge, that's very good. I implore people, please, when you hear something stupid on the show, call with something even stupider. We'll love it.
Yeah, if you want to add on to the All Smart team, you can go to greatgameorwhat.com or follow us at Great Game or What, wherever you do social media, whether it's on YouTube or whether you like to be on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. We're there across the board. Buck Showalter is our guest this week. You're going to hear from him shortly, and I'm so looking forward to sharing this interview because you've obviously covered the game of baseball. You've covered Buck as a manager, and you worked with him at ESPN as well, so you've got kind of that both perspective, similar to what you had with Terry Francona.
Right, and what I love so much about Buck, Jeff, is how he loves and appreciates all the tiny little things in baseball. Like doing a rundown play is not a little thing, but when it is orchestrated perfectly, executed perfectly, nothing makes him happier than that. When the right fielder, and he'll talk about this, backs up on a play and saves a run, that's like the greatest thing that's ever happened to him. I feel the same way about a lot of parts of baseball. You know, when I see a successful squeeze bunt put down, I almost start to cry because it's beautiful the way it's done. But I'm going to go on a slightly different route here on the things that make me so happy and just they just make baseball so special. It's always amazed me that I used to carry the baseball encyclopedia around with me when I'd go on road trips. It weighs literally 10 pounds, and I carried it in my bag, carried it on planes because I needed the baseball encyclopedia with me. The first name for years and years and years, alphabetically, that you see in the baseball encyclopedia is Hank Aaron, who, until Barry Bonds came along, hit more home runs than anyone in history, is one of the 5 greatest players of all time. Then David Aardsma, a pitcher, came along and took him off the list. I asked him about that. He was actually cognizant of the fact that he's number 1 all time. But the encyclopedia used to have hitters and pitcher registers, so Hank Aaron was still the number 1 guy on there. I always loved that. On May the 17th, that will be Carlos May's birthday. He's Lee May's brother, and the second time in this show we've mentioned Carlos May, who hasn't played in 40 years, all right? But Carlos May used to wear number 17, and his birthday was May the 17th. So when you look at the back of his jersey, he has his birthday, May 17.
That is beautiful.
Jerry Narron is former Major League catcher, Major League manager, and he used to fill out the lineup cards, whether he was the manager or the bench coach or any coach, and he would do it in calligraphy. I mean, it was the most beautiful handwriting you've ever seen in your life. And it would be up there in the dugout, and I would look at it, I would just be dazzled how beautiful this is, and it's just the lineup card. And he would put a special little dot over the I if the player was a Hall of Famer, which I just loved that little touch. I said, Jerry, how long does it take you to write in calligraphy like this? He goes, I could just do it in a couple minutes. Couple of minutes? It looked like it was written from the 1600s, with a fountain pen. Those are the little things that I love so much. So Bud Black, who's the manager of the Rockies, I should never tell this story, but in 1992, Bud, and I've been charting this for a year. He was pitching for the Giants. His career record went to 92-92 on that date. And the teams for which he had played were 796 on that day. So when we talk about the ultimate 500 pitcher, that was Bud Black. So I flew 1,500 miles to go tell Bud Black that story. He's a funny guy. But I say to him, look, Bud, I just want to let you know, I flew from Dallas to San Francisco this morning to tell you that you are the ultimate 500 pitcher. You're 92 and 92, and your teams are exactly 500 during the times that you've played. And he looked at me and he goes, you flew 1,500 miles to tell me that? He says, what is wrong with you? There must be something wrong with you. So Bud Black, by the way, was also a part of, I believe, the greatest battery in the history of baseball. I always check the battery, the pitcher and the catcher. So Bud Black, when he pitched for the Giants, his catcher was Steve Decker occasionally. So we had the Black and Decker battery.
Beautiful.
And on those days, Steve Russian, our brilliant friend, who's going to be on next week on Is This a Great Game or What? He said those were the days that Steve Decker used to wear the power tools of ignorance when he caught. Oh, my God, it's so good. The other thing, Jeff, that I love so much is just how there's always a connection between players. Like they've always played with somebody somewhere. So John Kruk and I, Krucky's made me laugh a zillion times. We're going to see the Marlins in spring training, and Edwin Rodriguez is their manager. And I don't know Edwin very well. So I said, Krucky, did you ever play with Edwin Rodriguez? And he looks at me and goes, yeah, I played with him in winter ball. Like, you hear stuff like that all the time. So here's the story he told me. This is graphic. It's awful. I'm going to tell you anyway. Edwin Rodriguez got hit in the mouth with a pitch in spring training. Teeth are flying all over the place. There is blood everywhere. And Edwin Rodriguez is in there in a heap in the batter's box with blood all over the place. Jose De Leon, the first base coach, comes down to see if he's okay. And he's so disgusted by what he's looking at, he faints right there on the field. And get this is not a laughing matter. They took Jose De Leon off in an ambulance, and Edwin Rodriguez stayed at the ballpark, even though he'd just been hit in the mouth with a pitch. So this is a spring training story, but we didn't have a spring training story because we didn't start the show until the regular season started. So Jeremy Guthrie, former pitcher, really funny guy, really smart guy. He used to ride his bike all the time to the ballpark. Like, if it was close enough, he would drive 10 miles on his bike to and from the ballpark and then go pitch in a major league game. So in spring training one year, he rode his bike to a spring training start, and then in full uniform, he got back on his bike and drove back to the facility, and he actually had his glove on his handlebars
with 8 years old.
Exactly. And as Michael Kadire said once, he said it was like a scene from The Sandlot.
Right.
Our starting pitcher is wearing a uniform, and he's got his glove. And I'll leave you with this, Jeff, since you are a great music guy. Bernie Williams, of course, was a great center fielder for the Yankees, and one of the great musicians out there. The way he sings, the way he plays the guitar, it's just beautiful. So I asked him last year, who's the greatest musician that singer you've ever played with? And he said, I played with Bruce Springsteen. So that means that he played for the boss, George Steinbrenner, and he played with the boss. Bruce Springsteen. When you look closely enough, Jeff, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Buck Showalter joins us next on Is This a Great Game or What? Thank you for listening.
And we're with Buck Showalter, one of my dear friends, former Major League manager, is going to be a Major League manager again if he wants. Buck, thanks for joining us. This is my son, Jeff, here.
You done good. Hi, Jeff. Well, tell you what, you guys are really skimming the bottom. You run out of people to come on?
We had Terry Francona on, Buck, and thank you so much for joining us. And we said, there are a few people on this list, yourself included, Buck, and Terry, and he said the same thing. He said, you guys must be really struggling to get guests. Terry and Buck are on the list.
Well, they're from the same age group, the self-deprecation. That's how they work. So,
it's also, I think when you've been humbled by the game, like Terry and I have, not humble, what's the word? You respect how fleeting it all can be, because, I talk a lot about, people ask me about somebody, and I'll go, I really like their path. I don't know what kind of exact manager they're going to be, but they followed a path that should lead them into success. These guys we live in a world today where people want to go from A to Z and just out-title people. They don't want to go to extended spring and winter ball and instructional league and different levels and learn. I love when somebody says, boy, I bet you have never seen that before. I said, oh, yeah, I have. I saw it in winter ball in Mexico. Yeah, I saw it in instructional league back in 82, a triple play that never hit leather.
Tell us what it is. Explain.
All right, we're in extended spring. You find out whether or not you want to manage or coach in extended spring. That's all the players they don't want to release, but aren't good enough to play in a full season A club back when they had regular minor leagues. So they're waiting for the half season clubs to open. So what do you do with these guys for a month or two before the draft? So you take them to extended spring. I had Mario Rivera there. I had Bernie Williams there. I had these kids that nobody knew who they were. But we're playing, I forget, I think it was the Pirates. First and second, 3-2 count, nobody out. I'm coaching third, back when managers had to coach third. And balls popped up. They're running on the count. To this day, you will never see me start the runners first and second, Jeff, with a 3-2 count. It used to be an automatic run. No. And I'll tell you why. The balls popped up. These two kids, neither one of them spoke English. By the way, I was one of, I think I had 32 players, 28 of them spoke Spanish only. I had Carlos Tosca and Carlos Lescano, only thing that got me through. So they're both running, right? Infield pop-up, that's one out. Infield fly. The guy on second going to third, I stopped him, got him headed back to second. The guy on first has got his head down, and he passes the guy going back to second.
Two outs.
The ball comes down, Jeff, and hits the other guy in the coconut for the third out. Now, I'm sitting there. I got a heck of a rally going. And next thing I know, I'm collecting helmets and walking off the field. So when I had called that report in, we used to call in oral reports and then write a written report on every game. I got a call the next day. You had a triple play that never hit leather? I go, yeah, Bobby Hoffman, God rest his soul. I said, I'll never see that again. All right, we're done. Top that one, Tim.
Buck, I can't top that. That's an all-timer. Now, you talked about the path. Okay, my path to making a career out of baseball came from my father, Jeffrey's grandfather, Pop, who had a great feel for the game, really good player, loved the game as much as anyone. What was your path, Buck? How did you end up loving the game so much? Where did that start?
Well, I grew up in a little town in the panhandle of Florida. We probably graduated 50 or 60 people. You had to really hustle for a prom date, I'm telling you. It was the smallest public school in the state of Florida. My dad was a principal for a while before he went over to the middle school. Try going to school, Jeff, where your dad's a principal.
Oh.
It's tough.
That sounds terrible.
Back then, we didn't have a band because the boys, you played all three sports. You went football, basketball, baseball. Football, baseball, basketball. You just went from sport to sport. And I started out in what we called a dungaree league. Basically, you got an old T-shirt, you got a magic marker, and you wrote a number on the back of it. And we made a field over the hill. I still remember, I was like 6, 7. We were building the backstop. And we only had 6 guys on each team. So that's how I learned to hit the ball the other way, because they could never put a guy in left field. And if you hit it too far in right field and hit it in the water ditch, you were out. It was a water ball because we only had one ball. So, people said, wow, you could really hit the ball the other way. I said, yeah, that was the dungaree league back in 1963. So you go from dungaree to minor leagues to little league to Babe Ruth. But I'm playing other sports in between. When you see guys that can't slide in the big leagues, which you see a lot of them, most of those are travel team players. Because when you are in basketball or football, you learn how to fall. And a slide is basically a controlled fall. And I want to embarrass them by telling you some of the guys that I had in the big leagues, good players that couldn't slide. But if I look back, if I see a bio that they played baseball only, it's a red flag for me.
Well, and you look at our pitchers these days, they're getting injured more than ever. And even in my little time, there were kids only pitching. I mean, I remember playing baseball, you'd pitch 2 innings, you play shortstop, you'd get thrown in right field, then you'd keep score for 2 innings to learn that skill set too.
Let me tell you, one year in between jobs, my son's senior year in high school, I noticed they were having trouble. They only had like 15 or 16 guys out there. It was junior, senior year. I used to go out there and just watch them. The guy said, "Hey, you want to help me coach?" I said, "No." I said, I'll be your groundskeeper. I'll watch the practices, whatever. I'll drag your field, cut the grass, but you need to be the head coach." But one day they couldn't get the guys engaged. And I said, "It's not their fault. It's your fault." I said, "It's our fault because you made the game boring. It's fun to play, but you had a kid just stand out in left field for an hour and a half picking his teeth while some guy's throwing batting practice and nobody hits and the ball doesn't." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Okay, I got your practice tomorrow. I got one practice to show you what I'm talking about." And Jeff, I do that in the big leagues in spring training. The attention span of major league players, each drill is like 8 to 12 minutes tops. You can't stay there on something like that. So I said, "Okay." They went out to stretch, and I go, "No, don't stretch. You're 14, 15, 16 years old. You were limber when you got out of bed. The heck with that. Here's what we're going to do. Where do you want to play?" He goes, "I've always wanted to be a shortstop." "All right, you're the shortstop." We played push-em-up baseball. Tim, remember that? Where you play an inning, you push up to the next position, position.
Yes.
I threw the pitcher, and everybody had an 0-2 count on them. No walks, no strikeouts. The ball's put in play. Guys run the bases. Guys catch the ball. They run the ball. After about 20 minutes, they were having the time of their life. And I turned to the coach. I said, "It's not their fault. It's our fault. It's a great game. Quit making it so boring." And I worry about that a little bit. Sometimes I think we've made boring faster in today's game.
That's a concern. Back to your dad for a minute, Buck. Tell us the story when you were a high school quarterback and you scored a touchdown. Tell us the story.
No, it was actually my sophomore year. I was a wide receiver, and I caught a touchdown pass from Robert Hudson. And I'm in the end zone. I don't know what possessed me. My dad used to go into the library that overlooked the end zone, turn off all the lights, and that's how he would watch the game. And I understand my dad played college football, was offered a contract with the Steelers before he decided to go to World War II. Long story there. But I jumped up one time, Tim, in the air with the ball over my head and then handed it to the official. Well, he's waiting on me on the front porch when I get home that night. Back then, you came straight home after the game on Friday night. And he said, "Hey, is that the first touchdown you've ever scored?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Is that the last touchdown you're ever going to score?" I said, "I don't think so." He says, "Well, act like you've been there before, and by the grace of God, you might be there again. The next time you do that," he said, "I will embarrass you." And I never did it again.
Wow.
He said, "Act like you've done it before. Have you ever done it before? Is that your first home run?" I know somebody did something. I said, "Wow, I remember the first home run I ever hit." "Oh, he's hit 212. "Oh, really?" It looked like it was the first one he'd ever hit.
Tell Jeff the story about on Baseball Tonight when you had to demonstrate a takeout slide of Harold Reynolds. Now, tell us the story with all the details. Jeff, he was not dressed in sweatsuit and sneakers. Tell us the story.
Well, we kept talking about slides into second base and what's legal, what's not. And Harold and I were talking. I told the camera guys, I said, "Listen, we're going to do a demo of this." Harold wanted to do a demo. And he didn't realize. I told the camera guys off the side, I said, "Listen, you got one take at this. Don't miss it. I'm going to take him out." And they went, "What?" I said, "I'm going to get him." So he put an old burlap sack down there, and I didn't realize there was these steel rivet screws on the floor of the set. So Harold's getting a feed, probably from Tim, and I'm coming in from first base, and I got a full suit on, tie, the whole 9 yards, and I slide. It's on tape somewhere, Tim, because they turned it into the Emmy show thing. And I got to tell you, Jeff, I smoked him. He was asshole up in the air, tea kettles, whatever you call it. And Tim, he had his feet up in the air, and I ripped my pants from above my kneecap to my cheek of my left rear. But we got it on tape. And I don't know if he's forgiven me yet. Has he, Tim? I don't know if Harold ever forgave me.
No, Harold is still surprised that he got taken out by a guy in a three-piece suit. But who was surprised? It was Buck. If he's going to do it, he's going to do it properly.
Right. It's great television, too. I mean, it's great TV. One shot only, I'm going to take him out. That is great.
All right, so Jeff, I played an old dog game. Maybe I was 60 years old, and I'm the next day, Buck calls me up, and he calls me out of the blue to say, okay, I heard you had a game last night. What music did you listen to on the way to the gym? He asked me like 5 different questions. Did you take layup lines during the game? How many assists did you have in the game? Did you go for beer and pizza after the game? And I answered all the questions. He goes, thanks, and then hung up. Buck, why in the world would you make a phone call like that? Are you just the most curious man in the world?
Oh, that sounds like something like Austin Powers or something. I have interest in people I like. It's how you learn, Tim. People don't ask questions. They don't listen. They're so worried about their next funny thing or how they can impress somebody instead of, learning. I mean, I learned, it's like analytic people and all these. I love having them in. I'll question them. I'm the guy, Jeff, that asks a question that nobody else wants to ask because they're afraid they're going to look stupid.
Now, Buck, I'm curious, as a longtime lover of the game, a manager of the game, a player, what is the subtle thing that you love about this game? The little things that intrigue you?
Well, it's I love the stats. You act like this is something new. We were doing this back in the 80s and early 90s. This isn't something new.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's just we have a lot more ways to pull the numbers. And, believe me, we were doing this with charts. My wife was charting games where they hit the ball back in Oneonta in the New York Penn League for me. She used to, I'd come back, we'd play the Little Falls Mets. I'd give her the chart and she'd put it in my big notebook so we knew where to play everybody next time we faced them. But I like the things, there's such a small divider of wins and losses at that level. These are the best players in the world. So your attention to detail and the little things and the confidence it gives your team that you have a little edge. It might be knowing the rules. It might be like there's so much, Jeff, off the ball that people miss. The game's really, if you will watch off the ball, you will see the sincerity of players. Will you see the right fielder backing up second base on a ball down the left field line? Will the center fielder converge on second on a stolen base for a possible overthrow? You ever notice how guys get up on stolen base and trot to third and the ball goes to center, and sometimes it goes into center and they don't go anywhere? That's because the center fielder, Bernie Williams and Gerald Williams, used to talk about that habit they developed in the minor leagues with me and with us, the Yankee farm system, and they couldn't break it. It's a habit. But if you watch off the ball, maybe in the dugout, watch guys' reactions to different things. I don't, as far as celebrations, whatever, I always look at the players. It's their game. If they're not upset about something that happened on the field, I should not impose the way I was brought up on their game. So I try not to, something will happen on the field. Somebody will do a jig or a dance at the home plate on a home run, and I'll just kind of look down the dugout, and it doesn't seem to bother them. So I go, who am I? I just don't want to be the old guy on the porch screaming at the young kids.
Well, good for you, Buck. That's hard these days. Tell us about the drill you had in spring training one year with Deion Sanders teaching base running.
Well, we had to basically, we were doing rundowns, and we could not get Deion out. No, we could not get him out. I said, Deion, go stand in the dugout. Go stand in the dugout. But we had a rule. It used to be you teach rundowns. Don't even get me started about rundowns and the way that they go on today. But the key is the first guy that has the ball. You can't get the ball in separation from the runner. But Deion there was a rule that you could never fake a throw. Because if you fake it, the guy who's receiving the ball is getting faked out too. He doesn't know when to close ground. But with Deion, we changed the rules. So with a guy like Deion, you can fake the ball. It's the only way to get him out, Jeff. If you fake it, you have to be able to tag him on the next play. In other words, fake, step, tag. Because he could start and stop. This was a whole different level of foot speed and quickness I had never seen before. The first time I saw him steal second base, and he could have been any type of baseball player he wanted to be. He had such a level of athleticism that nobody had ever seen. I thought Bernie Williams was athletic. I thought, I had seen a lot of guys come through, Jeter and whatever. I had never seen anybody athletically like Deion. And he was actually our most popular guy on the team. He was a different character in baseball. He got how it was a little different. Our players loved him. When I sent him up to the big leagues from AA, he didn't want to leave. He thought he was going to AAA. When I called him and said, "Hey, you're going to big leagues," he said, "Hey, man, I'd rather just stay here and finish the year. We got a good group of guys, got a chance to win a ring." I said, "Dion, you understand? We're talking about the big leagues, not AAA." And then the phone hit the floor, and he had to ask his girlfriend to come see if I was telling the truth. I love the. I stay in touch with him. I love Dion.
So, Buck, if you can see in the video here, and we do the podcast audio and video, we have a little something here. It's a Buck Showalter gnome. Are you? And this, my dad comes to Pennsylvania to film the podcast with me because he's afraid of computers, and so we set up here. And he brought this, strapped it into the passenger seat, put a little seatbelt over it, and he brought the gnome. How did this come about? Do you give approval for these kind of giveaways, or did it just happen?
You know, that one they snuck in on me. And some lady knitted hat, toboggan type hats to go over the top of that head, believe it or not. And wait a minute, wait, hold on a second.
I bet is he grabbing one of
He's got a...
Toboggan?
Yeah, it's like a snow cap. Yeah.
It's keeping the garden gnome warm.
My grandsons love it. That's why I keep it here. And someone sent that to me, and I kept it somewhere. But we were really struggling to get people to come to the ballpark when I first got to Baltimore, and I was willing to be ridiculed in order to get more people in the ballpark. And I was all in. But I told them, I said, "You've got to have better options than me as a gnome."
Right.
It's pretty popular. Just,
What do your grandchildren call you, Buck?
Papa.
Papa. Okay.
Yeah.
See, my dad was Pop, and there'll never be another one like my Pop. So it would take two of me to become one of my dad. That's how great he was. So I'm Pop. It takes two of me. Buck, take us back again. This is one of my favorite things. You take the job in Baltimore. You're in your office for the first time. Tell us what was over your left shoulder as you're sitting at your desk for the first time in the manager's room at Camden Yards. What did you do? Explain.
Yeah, you got too good a memory. Where did you hear this stuff? Are you talking about the picture that has
Yes.
So they got this big, huge mural right out in front of my desk. And it's a game at Camden Yards, but the scoreboard's up there, and they're getting hammered. Like 9-2, 7-2 in the last inning. And the other team has bases loaded or something. And I said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "Get it out of here." I'm really? And I actually think we had a team destroyment of that picture together as a group. But we got it done. We were there almost 9 or 10 years. It was a lot of fun.
Right.
Good city.
Right.
You can tell, Buck, how important family is to you. And one of my favorite memories growing up with my dad was the years that I got to go to the Hall of Fame with him. We would drive up from Maryland to Cooperstown, and it was great. And one year, he's driving, and he brought Get Smart, his favorite sitcom of all time, on DVD. And my dad told me, of course, father-son, sit front seat and chat the whole time. He said, "No, you need to watch this show. It's my favorite sitcom." So I sat in the back. He sat in the front driving the entire way. And I rifled through these episodes. And I felt bad about 20 minutes in. I paused it and I said, "Dad, this is kind of depressing. I'm just back here watching TV. That's not the kind of kid I am, right?" And he goes, "I am enjoying this because I'm seeing this in my mind." That was his favorite sitcom, was Get Smart. Do you have a favorite sitcom that was to the love that my dad had?
Any point in your life, have you gone to put on your shoe and put it up to your ear?
Yes, I have. I put my spikes up against my face once. That was not a good idea.
What was it? Barbara Feldon, Agent 86?
99.
99.
Right. Maxwell Smart was Agent 86, yes. 44 was the guy that used to hide out in the couch. But, Buck, tell us your favorite sitcom, because nobody knows it better than you do.
The Andy Griffith Show. I've got all 249 episodes on tape. You got to understand, growing up in the South, it came on 5 times a day. The first big expenditure my wife and I made getting married, $349, and we didn't have it. We bought a VCR recorder. We used to record the games in black and white 12-inch TV, the PIX games of the Yankees, and I'd come home from managing the Oneonta Yankees or the Fort Lauderdale Yankees, Albany, and she would record the game, and I would go home, eat bologna sandwiches. Remember the ones that used to bubble up? You had to cut the corners so they wouldn't bubble up. And I would watch the Yankee game on replay, and I would try to get home without knowing who won or lost. But I recorded all the Andy Griffith shows off that VCR. I've got them in a closet here. Once they went to color version, and once Barney left, it was kind of. But I taped them because I was afraid there wasn't going to be a show that I could leave the room and have my kids get something out of. But there was a certain theme and something you could learn from every show. But it stood the test of time.
Right.
I still. People, I got pulled over the other day by, I swear, it was Barney Fife.
Buck, one of my favorite things we did on Baseball Tonight was when you acted as our scout to look at what you were looking for as a scout in a player from the feet to the top of the head. So we started at the feet, and I asked a rhetorical question. I said, so Buck, when you're looking for a guy you're not looking for a guy whose feet are pointed out this way, and you're
10 to 2. You don't want the 10 to 2 feet. 10 minutes to 2 o'clock. You want the guys that are just barely turned in. Now, understand, Jeff, there's exceptions to everything. There are exceptions. Not many, but my point was, you go to a ball game, you're the scout, and you're watching this kid from Irving High School in Texas. And you get there, and right before game time, you get rained out. Okay, you got to turn in a report. What are you going to turn in? What are you going to turn in? What'd you see? Did you sit with the mom and dad? First thing you do, you find the mom and dad, hopefully a brother or sister, and you sit behind them. First of all, you should have gone to the homeroom teacher and the guidance counselor at the high school and talk to them. You should have seen in the parking lot what kind of car he was driving, what his girlfriend might be like, and then you start with the body. You watch the interaction of him with his teammates. You watch the practice habits. You watch, don't be led down roads of things that anybody can do. There's certain type of thigh structure. There's certain feet. You don't see guys wearing size 7 in the big leagues. Okay.
I'm so sorry, Dad.
Right.
So sorry.
Carl Ravitch wears a 7. I usually wear a 7.5, and we're not in the big leagues. That's for sure.
Well, you're very good at what you do.
Right.
So, the hands, but there's like Zach Britton has short fingers, but it helps his sinker. Mariano Rivera had really long fingers, which allowed him to throw through the cutter. Certain color eyes. There's no secret that batting champions, for the most part, have a certain color eyes. If you look at back when batting averages meant something. So if you look at, I don't ever want to draft a guy out of high school if I can help it with a full beard. You want him to be shaven once a week, maybe. Okay, you don't want a full beard as a 17, 18-year-old. They have already tapped out. You better like what you see because they're not getting any bigger, any stronger.
Jeter, when you saw Jeter for the first time.
I don't think he shaved till he was like 20. It was beautiful. He walks in, he weighed 160 pounds, soaking wet. Mom and Dad were great. His interaction with his sister in the dugout was perfect. He had alert eyes. He noticed things peripherally. When you watched him, he saw what was going on in different places. It wasn't like this. But you can pick up all these things without ever seeing a pitch. And then the other part is the easy part. That's the easy part, okay? But I knew that with his upbringing, New York wasn't going to affect him. He wasn't going to have. He had a good, firm base, and he had his feet on the ground. That was big.
Right, Jeff. Buck went to see a guy at Bowie AA one night after managing a major league game in Baltimore. So he went to see his kid who hadn't seen. He comes back the next day. I see him. I say, Buck, what did you think of the kid? And he said, loved him. Great face, square head. That's how he described him. Great face, square head. Would you please explain what that means?
might have been a day game or midweek. I don't know. Jim Johnson, our great closer there for years, was pitching in rehab, and everybody said, this guy over there, he's not bad, but he's okay, but I kept looking at him and go, this guy. So we get through with our game, got through with the media. I walked up the tunnel there by the garbage, there underneath the Camden Yards. I got in my car and I drove to Bowie. I get there, Tim. I come through the right field fence. I'm in full uni, and Jim's just starting to warm up to pitch, I think, the 8th inning. And I walked by him, and the look he gave me, wait a minute, I just saw you on TV an hour ago. No, but you got me off task there. Just a square, you don't you like chiseled, defined features. It's almost like selective. It's like you take with horse races. I remember Scotty Feldman. When I met his mother, I felt real good about it, but she was a big, strong, well-defined woman. And Scotty ended up being 65, 66, but he wasn't at the time. So there's so many ways you look at players to project them. I listen to scouts all the time. Their ability to project players was always something that was a skill that you had to acquire over years. Terry Ryan gave me great advice. He goes, if you ever get a scout that has been in an area a long time, and they always had at the end of the draft meetings a gut guy. Who's your gut guy? Well, that meant somebody they've known since they might have been in the 8th grade. You've known the family. You know everything. He said, my best drafts when I took those gut guys in the 14th, 15th, 16th round. And I always remembered that because that scout knew more than just his statistics. Jeff, give me a memory of your dad growing up about baseball.
My baseball career was short-lived, and no pun intended there. I wasn't a great player. I ended up being a theater performer and a singer and all those good stuff, and my dad was super supportive of all of that. But I remember very specifically, my grandfather passed away when I was only 10, and I'm named after my grandfather. And there was a game at Darnestown Park. It's got one baseball field. We didn't play on those big ones that got 8 or 9, and half of them are lit up. One ballpark right down the street from our house, and we had Nick Pack, who was the big Asian kid from across the town.
What was his name?
Nick Pack.
P-A-K. Right.
Nick Pack. And he was that kid, and I'm sure you've seen this, and I would love your assessment here. He was the kid who was 5'9" and 165 pounds.
He was way
10.
bigger than me.
He had a full
beard, right?
A goatee or something. But he is throwing gas. And one summer, we played against him every single year. And one summer, he blew up. And all of a sudden, he's this huge kid, and he's throwing harder than everybody else. And I'm scared. I was afraid of the ball. And that's something we don't talk enough about with our kids. I admit it. It was hard when those kids got bigger and I stayed small. Well, I was afraid to face him. Well, ultimately, I come up to the bat, I've got my head in there, I got my grandfather, and I've got my dad there. And I believe it's one of the last games, probably, my grandfather saw me play. And he's throwing gas, and I'm able to just get a little bit of the bat on the ball and hit a ball over the third baseman's head, a line drive. Pulled it, got ahead of it, watched it, and I remember standing on second base and seeing my dad, and I don't want to get emotional. This is what baseball does to you, right? Seeing my dad and my grandfather on their feet cheering, because not only did I just hit a double in a beautiful way in baseball, I beat Nick Pack.
I tell people all the time, it's so relevant. We won the state championship my senior year in this little bitty town. Coming over the hill that led into our little town, the whole city had come out to greet us coming back from South Florida, which was like being out of the country for us. We never got to leave the city. Coming over the hill with all the lights on and bringing the state championship home, I still get tingles about it. But it's all relevant. That is relevant to winning a playoff game or winning the World Series. It's all relevant. Mm-hmm. It really is. I tell people all the time. Now, don't get me going.
Right.
Guys, it's been fun. Let's do it again.
Right. Buck, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for the laughs today. It was tremendous. Buck Showalter.
Buck Showalter, thank you. Really appreciate your time.
All right. Say hi to everyone for us, okay?
God bless you guys.
Thank you so much to Buck Showalter for joining us. This is a great game or what? Steve Russian, the great writer, is going to be joining us next.
The greatest writer will join us next week.
Which is coming from you, who has authored 3 books of your own. You're a baseball writer in the Hall of Fame, so that is high praise. And we're so excited
Jeff,
to chat with
not
them.
even close, the writing ability between me and Steve Russian. That's the difference between you and Randy Johnson in size and in pitching ability. That's how much better Steve Russian is than me. He's incredible.
So there was one thing that kind of stuck out to me when we just talked to Buck Showalter, which was how much Derek Jeter came up in conversation here. And I just didn't realize. I know he briefly managed him in the majors, but I didn't realize he had also managed him in minors.
Yeah, well, Buck was the manager when Jeter was coming up. And Jeter's first spring training, the equipment guy said, what number should we give the kid for when he's, ready to come to the big leagues? Should we give him, like 68, 64, whatever, really high number? And Buck said, give him a single-digit number. He's going to be really special. Wow. That's what Buck saw at a very, and Jeff, there are like no single-digit numbers left for the Yankees. No. They're all taken, but number 2 was available, so Buck said you should give Jeter number 2. And Jeter, no matter what people tell you, Jeff, Jeter's an underrated player, not an overrated player. He was incredible as a teammate, as the captain of the Yankees. And I'm gonna finish with something corny here, Jeff. After they won his 5th ring, 2009, my job was to interview Derek Jeter after the game. And I'm running around with a camera chasing after him, but he won't stop because he's in a hurry. He goes off the field. He goes through the clubhouse where there is a champagne celebration going on because the Yankees just won the World Series. He didn't stop to talk to a soul. He walked all the way through the clubhouse. And on the other end was a lobby of the clubhouse. And out in the lobby was his mother and his father. Oh. And he went and hugged them, thanked them, and then he went in and celebrated with his teammates because he knew none of this happens without them.
What an amazing way to wrap up today's show. I'm almost in tears. That was such a beautiful... After his 5th ring. It's not like after his first game.
Right. So no matter what you hear about him, multiply it by 10. That's how good he is.
Thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of Is This a Great Game or What? Make sure to follow wherever you listen. Subscribe. You can watch us on YouTube as well. Full video podcast up for you every week. And thank you again for being part of our family.